All right, very, very briefly here, some of the questions that we look at when we do index construction, and if you see a list of ETFs, each one will be based on a different index. So some of the questions you need to ask to understand that product is, first of all, what asset class is in that index? So you may get an index that just covers commodities, maybe some gold in there, some silver, some platinum, for example. You may get an index that just covers bonds or just covers equities, and each different asset class will have a different set of risk characteristics, and it's important to understand those. So the first question you want to ask when you look at an ETF is what asset class is inside here. The second one in the yellow is, how do I pick the basket of goods that goes into that index? Do I take the 40 biggest companies? Do I take ones that all have the same sector? Do I take ones that all have a high dividend yield? And there'll be a rule for each index that says, how do I pick the ones that go into it? The blue then is the weighting that says, once I've picked my companies, how do I work out this average? Is it an equally weighted average? Do some count more than others, et cetera, et cetera? And then finally, each index will have a set of rules. There's some new regulation coming out that requires all index rules to be published, available to you for you to see. So before you go and invest, make sure, insist at least that you can see the rules of the index or the rules of the fund, and go through those. Sometimes they're a bit complicated. I mean, our document is quite a thick one, and there can be a bit of legalese in there, but it speaks about treatment of corporate actions and reconstitutions and selections and that sort of thing. But it's important to know that there is a set of rules so that you can hold the provider accountable to that. All right, I'm going to talk very briefly about our equity indices. At a high level, we've got a few different types. We've got market benchmark indices, so the top 40 you would have heard of, the mid-cap maybe, our property index, our pref share. Those measure, I suppose, asset classes. We then have some style indices that you'll see in the documentation, so a RAFI index, there's a dividend plus index, a rand hedge, and so on. There's some foreign benchmarks, so you could get an index that covers European stocks or Japanese stocks. And finally, today I'm going to speak about the sector indices, which look very, very specifically at resources, industrials, and financials. All right, so what is that? We offer 3 indices that I'm going to speak about tonight. There's a RESI 10, which is the 10 largest companies that are classified as resources. The Financials 15, which is the 15 largest financial companies and the 25 largest industrial companies. And this is a classification system that goes back probably 30 or 40 years or a bit more maybe. So it's something that stayed with the JSE. And the classification is done according to where each company earns its revenue from. So any company, if you look on the left, the resources, that is either an oil or gas producer, which is effectively Sasol, or any mining company would be classified by the JSE as a resource company. And most of their income is earned either through mining or oil and gas. And you can start to see that we would expect those kinds of companies to behave the same way. They've got the same sensitivities to macroeconomic factors, to the law changes, to the legal environment, to global demand, that sort of thing. And it's interesting to put them all into the same basket so you can measure a very specific thing. Financials is what you would expect, so it's banks, insurance companies, financial service providers, property companies are in there. So those would be property development companies that would go and buy, 3 shopping malls and rent them out to people, financial services and real estate. And industrials is effectively everything else. So anything that is not a resource or a financial, we just call it an industrial. And that's a very broad bucket. So you'll see there's telecommunications, there's tobacco, there's retailers, there's healthcare, there's media. Everything that isn't one of those first 2 things would fit into industrials. If we look at our all-share index, which is the 99% of our largest companies, and we sort of have a look at those 3 sub-indices, the RESI 10, the FINI 15, and the Indy 25, you'll see it's very interesting how much of the full market that it covers. So our RESI 10 index covers 23% of the entire all-share index. Even though it's only 10 companies, it's nearly a quarter of the entire market capitalization of the JSE. And that really speaks to the historic importance of resource companies in our market. It's diminished over time, but a lot of the economy was built on mining companies, and that speaks very much to that. The financial, those 15 companies in that index form about 15% of our full listed universe of stocks. These 25 companies, the biggest 25 industrials, are about half of all the listed companies. And then the remainder, everything that's left in the all-share, is 13%. Now, when we talk about weights, there's a distinction between the number of companies, because in this entire all-share universe, there's around about 160 companies that we stick in there. All right. So 160 of the companies are in there, and obviously there's only, 50 that form this full 87%. So there's 110 companies in that little segment. And the reason those weights don't really tie up is because when you look at weights, we don't give everybody an equal weight. We say a company that is bigger in terms of market capitalization, and market cap really says, if I were to go and buy the whole company, if I were to go and buy every single share issued by that company, how much would I pay for it? And that's the market capitalization. So a company with a very big market capitalization has got a bigger impact on the economy, a bigger role in the economy. There's more trading activity than a company with a very, very small number of shares or very small market capitalization. So what we do is we put the bigger companies into the index, and the smaller companies then make up the remainder. So that's why when we pick these top 10, it's the top 10 based on size, and the weighting is based on total size. Just to give you a sense of the numbers, so there we go. There's our breakdown again, resource, financial, industrial, and then the other is 109 companies. If I just skipped a slide, I wouldn't have to do it in my head. So let that be a lesson. Market cap is the total size of the market segment represented by that index. So in our all-share index, we currently have about 9.3 trillion rands worth of market capitalization. So if you wanted to go buy the all-share index, if you wanted to go buy every listed company in South Africa, that's how much it would cost you. My piggy bank isn't that big. Maybe yours is. I hope so. You can send me a commission check if it is. If you look at the breakdown, our Resi 10 index covers 1.6 trillion rand of that 9.3. 1.4 for financials, 5 trillion for industrials, and then the remainder sits in that not applicable. There's 109 companies, and they are the same weights again.